Dave Zumpano from the Estate Planning Law Center joining us here on the program this morning. And Happy New Year, a new year, Dave. How are you?
Thank you. Same to you. I'm great, What's not to be great about?
Yeah, I hear you.
Did you get your vaccine?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not old enough.
All right.
There you go. That's something to be thankful for, I guess, at this point, right? Well, Dave, it's been a while. I think, since the last time we talked to you, and as I mentioned, we're all aware it's a new year. Some things remain the same. Some things obviously different. But let's start off. Are there any changes or things that we need to know going into the new year? Any changes in regards to this pandemic that the government has produced for us that could either help or hurt us when it comes to our estate and our planning and our finances?
A couple things. So, we've been talking over the last, I want to say 6 or 8 months about a government program, the Medicaid program, which provides and pays for care in a nursing home, but it also pays for care in your home. So there's what's called a community program, which enables people to stay in their own home and get care in their own home, and Medicaid will pay for it. And then there's a second, so I'll give you, I'll just remind you about that. And then the other one is there's been a new change to the power of attorney law. So we'll talk about that briefly. So the first one we've talked about at length, but it's been a couple months and the holidays, and I think a lot of people are wearing thin, and especially a lot of people listening today could fall into a couple different categories.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, before you start, was there a change to that deadline or to sign up as well, or was that a different program?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the change. Exactly. So you're right on with some of the background. Just for some of our listeners who may not have, kept in the loop on all this. So the deadline. So what happened was that the rule for you to qualify for care in your home. So your listeners could be one of three. They could be someone who is, elderly and starting, finding it hard to, cook their meals and get around and get mobile. Maybe they've given up the keys to the car. Those are all sure signs it's time to have the conversation. Or it might be talking to the children of those folks. Especially with the pandemic, I think a lot of, what we call the sandwich generation, those of us who have parents that we're caring for and children, high stress. And so, how are we making sure mom and dad are getting their meals? How are we making sure they're taking their meds every day? Again, perfect signs that it's time to get some kind of level of care in the home. The beautiful part about the care in the home is it's not like they come and live in, although they could. I mean, my mom, up until her passing a couple months ago, had around-the-clock care 24 hours in the home. And it could be as little as 2 hours a day. And so you remember, you want to keep your elderly parents on routines. You want to make sure they're eating. The first thing that happens is they stop eating because they don't remember to cook, or it's too much hassle to cook. And so they resort to picking and things like that. So that's kind of the first sign that they probably need someone coming in. The other part is the house starts getting disheveled. They're not picking up, things of that nature. And so these are all signs. Obviously, if you're worrying, that's a great sign that it's time to get a consult. Now, the rules were and have been very simple. We can get anyone qualified within 30 days. That has always been the rule. That rule changed about 8 or 9 months ago, and the rule now is you can't. They've implemented a look-back period like the nursing home Medicaid, which says if you give assets away, then you might not be eligible for a period of time. Now, the good news is the look-back period is 30 months, not 60, but here's the difference. The ability to just apply and qualify regardless of transfers is going away. It was supposed to have gone away last September 1st. Then they extended it to January 1st. Now we've got an extension, just 2 more months now.
So Dave, let me interrupt you just to clarify for people, so people understand. When you apply for Medicaid and you're in a nursing home, you can have, $15,500 plus some exempt resources, some things.
If you're single.
If you're single
married,
person, right?
Yeah,
if you're single. We'll talk about a single person for a minute. And then you can have prepaid funeral and there's some other things. But if you have more than that, you generally don't qualify. Now, if you have given assets away in the 5 years before you apply for Medicaid in the nursing home, that could create a penalty period.
Those are
Correct?
the transfers that you talked
The
about.
transfers, if you're
Right.
giving money away. Now, what you're saying is if you apply for in-home care, then they essentially do the same analysis. They look to see what you've given away, but this is the last 30 months you said instead of 5 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Is it
but
the
here's
same? Is
important
it
part.
the same
Go ahead.
asset limit? Is it still 15.5 for a single
Yeah.
person?
Yeah, and then married, yes. So they call Medicaid nursing home without walls. So yes, they follow the same general guidelines as nursing home. However, as we said, the look back period is 30 months. Now we know that doesn't mean that's the penalty period. That's one of the most confusing parts people have about Medicaid. They think if I gave an asset away, I'm not eligible for 60 months for nursing home. Now the rule for in-home care is say if I gave an asset away, I'm not eligible for 30 months. No, the eligibility depends on how much you gave away and when. And so what happens now is that look back period and penalty period being assessed to community Medicaid will be starting again in a couple months. So what they're doing right now is they're saying for any applications filed in February or March, and that's it, just February or March, they will not look back. So here we are. It's January 27th. So we are, or 26th. We're coming on February. So we're down to our final 6 or 7 weeks, and the application process itself takes a little bit of time. So what we
Dave,
always
just to
say
be
is
clear, just to
get the
clarify with you,
analysis.
you're saying there's no look back period if you apply for in-home nursing care, either during the month of January or February. There's no look back.
Or March, correct? Yeah.
Or March as
well.
well.
They're suspending the look back. They've suspended it now once or twice, but now they've kind of given a hard deadline that they're not suspending it beyond April 1st. So now what this does, and they're great questions, Mark, because it's so important for people listening to understand. This is an opportunity that's going to be going away. Many people cannot qualify immediately. They need to do some kind of planning, and that planning does not inhibit eligibility currently.
So, Dave,
But
let's give a
April 1st,
concrete
it will.
example so people can understand. Let's assume a person has $115,000 today, right now. If they gave away $100,000, they kept the $15,000 and applied on February 1st for in-home nursing care services, we'll call it, that person would be eligible?
No.
Forgetting about the income, but just from an asset standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
That person would be eligible.
Well, I mean, they would be financially eligible. Obviously, there's a requirement of medically eligible, but that we can meet now.
But asset-wise, that would you'd be qualified. Asset.
Yeah. The other thing I say, and this is what kind of horrifies me a little bit when we say if someone gives something away. That where me as the estate planning attorney starts to panic, because many people listen to me and you on this radio station and then become their own self-lawyer and they start giving stuff away. It's always my recommendation, always, to never give anything to anybody, because once you do, you lose control and you lose access. There are ways to make the assets not available for Medicaid purposes, but still available to you and for you with certain restrictions, but still with you still staying in control of that money. And so that's really an important factor. A lot of people say, well, I trust my kids. Well, that's okay. You could trust your kids. But what if your kid gets sued? What if your kid gets divorced? As all these things happen, you give assets away, you put them at the risk of the people you give them away to.
So, Dave, let me
trust your kids with a trust.
Let me
right?
go back on two. There's
There you
two
go.
other issues that come up. So so people understand. So one is, what is the age where someone could qualify for in-home nursing? What's the minimum age that you could make that application?
Again, usually 65 is a safe age. However, younger than that, you can, because it's more of a
medical need.
It's more of a need
Right.
than an age.
And what is the
however,
income? What is the income limit? Someone who say a single person, they're at home. They only had $15,000, so we won't worry about transferring assets. What amount of income can that person have and be eligible for the in-home nursing care aid, Medicaid aid?
So it's usually around the SSI rate, $700. I think it's $787 a month in financial. However, any excess income, can be eliminated by using a different type of trust, which is an income trust. and it's a form of qualified income trust. And what that does is the government says, listen, if you take your excess income and put it in this trust, the trust then holds that income for your use. So you can use it still to pay your medical expenses and your regular needs, whatever they are. Pay your house, your bills. So you could still pay that even if you're over the income limit. There's a secondary. It's called an income trust, right? And then so you can have an income trust and an asset trust, both to qualify. Really complicated for purposes of conversation here today. The good news is the message that the listener has to get is that there's lots of options to keep individuals in control, to keep access to their money for the things they choose while still qualifying for these benefits. And then the other big point that's important here is that that look back period, that window of what I'm going to call the freedom to plan and apply, the window is closing. And so if someone's listening and they're thinking, oh, I'm wondering if it's time, if in doubt, check. It doesn't cost a thing to find out. And then we've seen when a lot of people, when the care gets started, once it's in place, then you're on, and then it becomes a matter of increasing number of hours. For example, when my mom first went on, she was approved for 8 hours a day. And then over time, then I went to 10, then 16, and then 24.
So Dave, if somebody qualifies now, let's say they qualified as of February 1st, even though the law is going to change, say in April or May, once you're on, and you don't have to worry about being kicked off.
You don't have to re-qualify.
Now, do you have to be qualified asset-wise on the first day of the month that you apply? So if you waited till February 2nd and you disposed of your assets one way or another, you have to be eligible on the first day of the month. Is that correct? That
Correct.
You apply.
Correct.
So you got to make sure you do this before the first of the month that you're going to apply, right?
Yeah. So that's why we're running out of time, because even if you wanted to apply in March, all of your planning would have to be done in February. So we're really into our last 28 days here, where we can do this, somewhat proactively. So, but the thing here is, and I think these are all great points, is that these are conversations people listen to. And there's someone listening right now who's saying, Mom, they're feeling the stress. They're trying to catch their breath, because we're all experiencing it. While I've dealt with it with my parents for years, now I'm starting to deal with my in-laws. And so, it's an ongoing challenge for all of us. And what's really nice is this is like a handout, reach out to help support those people and to keep them healthy and to keep them whole, keep them engaged. And it really slows any deterioration. There's so many benefits to this outside of taking care of mom and dad, but their long-term health, their mental health, and their physical health all really can be enhanced by this little extra care, even if it's just 2 to 3 hours a day.
And Dave, before we run out of time, and we're running out of time, before we run out of time, just touch on the changes in the power of attorney law that you mentioned at the outset.
Yeah. So, funny story, New York, we're interesting, but I've been practicing law now going on 30 years, and I could say there's been 2 or 3 changes to the power of attorney law in that 30 years, and I think the last one came about 8 years ago. And the New York power of attorney became the most complicated power of attorney in the country. In fact, the power of attorney in New York, as it stands today, is more complicated than executing a will. Okay, and what makes it complicated is there's boxes to initial. There's certain parts where you have to sign in front of a notary. There's other parts where you have to sign in front of witnesses. There's other things you have to opt into, other things you have to opt out of. It's a very, very complicated document. Well, the legislature's been working with the Bar Association over the last couple of years, and they realized that. And so what they've done is they've simplified it down. They've kept the meat and bones of it, but they've put it into a single document, reduced some of those different restrictions and all the different variations, and have simplified it. Now, that being said, it's still a very complicated document, okay? And here's the thing. It changes June 1st. So, again, here we go. They make the law, and then they give everybody time to work into it. So what that means is all your powers of attorneys being executed today are still valid and will always remain valid. Any power of attorney anyone has signed up to this date remains valid. I have people who have powers of attorneys that were executed before the last change. Those are still valid. So it's important everybody understands, don't rip your powers of attorney up or things of that nature. However, those of you that have a power of attorney may want to review it with your attorney to say, look, would the new one be better for me? Would it be less confusing for my loved ones? Will it be easier for the banks to recognize and honor? And so it's one of those things where we always say at the Estate Planning Law Center about maintenance, maintaining your plan. It's a living, breathing thing. It has to be maintained as the rules change, the laws change, your finances change, your family changes, and your health changes. As those things happen, you really should be looking at your estate plan to say, hey, what might I want to be changing or updating here? So this is one of those topics where you really want to be reviewing that with your attorney, the next time the opportunity comes up.
David, we had a listener who texted in a question, and they don't elaborate on the question, but they just make a point. So if you want to respond to it or can offer an opinion, but they asked for, what's your opinion of New York State's partnership for Medicaid insurance?
Okay, so the partnership program. The partnership program is an insurance. It's a partnership between the state of New York and the insurance companies, and what it is, that's really a long-term care policy. So there's two types of long-term care policies. It's insurance that pays for your nursing home if you go in the nursing home. Number one, I am a huge fan of long-term care insurance. People say, well, I can't afford it. Well, you can afford it if you want to afford it, because the cost of long-term care insurance for a year for a 70 to 75-year-old is less than the cost of a nursing home for 1 month, and it'll pay your nursing home cost. So that's number one. I'm a big fan of long-term care insurance. Now, some people can't qualify for other reasons, and some people can't afford it, so there are other options. Now, the second thing is there's regular long-term care insurance, the traditional policies, and then there's this called the partnership policy. What the partnership policy does, it says, listen, if you buy a policy that pays 3 years worth of Medicaid, it pays 3 years worth of nursing home costs, then Medicaid at the end of that period of time will not look at your assets. Okay, meaning you can have more assets than the law allows, and they'll still qualify you for Medicaid for the nursing home after your long-term care benefit policy runs out. So when your partnership policy runs out, you automatically qualify for Medicaid and your assets are protected. That being said, your income is not protected, so you still have income limits you have to comply with. But the assets you have, you don't have to give them away. You could keep them, and the long-term care policy would pay through that minimum period of time that's required by the law, in some cases 3 years, some cases 5 years. And then at the end, your assets are exempt for purposes of qualifying.
Dave, sometimes people
so it's a great policy.
Understand best with an example. So if you had a person who had $1 million and that person purchased a partnership policy with New York State, they paid their premiums, they went into a nursing home, the policy would pay for 3 years. After the third year, that person would be eligible for Medicaid, and Medicaid would pay the nursing home cost, even though the person's got $1 million sitting in the bank or in an investment account. Correct?
Yes, and. So yes, and the only other element is income. So if that $1 million produced $50,000 a year of income, that would not be exempt. Just the $1 million would be. And the rationale, it makes sense, because what the government's saying here in this partnership is, listen, when they look at the statistics, the average person that lives in a nursing home lives there about 27 months, right? Which is the average. The problem with the average, it means some people stay a lot longer and some people stay a lot shorter. The problem with that average is there's a lot of people that go in and die within 3 months. So it really skews the average. I cannot count the number of clients that I have had over the years, and I mean many, that are in nursing homes beyond 5 years. They're there 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. So that's what gets a little bit skewed. But the government's policy is, listen, as long as you're paying that your way, that 3 years and in some cases 5 years, then we're not going to count it, because you could have done all these legal things to protect your assets, but instead you covered your time. And this is what's great when the government works together with the people, because then everybody's paying their fair share. Mm-hmm. So if you elect to have your insurance policy pay your fair share, that's great. If we're doing legal planning, you still have to pay your fair share, some element of your money. We're going to protect 60 to 80%. Even after the day you go in a nursing home, we can protect 60 to 80%, in some cases 100%. But there's always some element you got to pay, and that's the way it should be, that kind of partnership and balance.
Dave, we're going to run. The news is going to jump in here on us soon, but I know you're always trying to help folks out navigate through all of this, and I know it might be a little different now with this pandemic. But if folks have questions, and I'm sure you can answer them for them, how do they contact the Estate Planning Law Center?
Yeah, we always recommend education, right? This is education for the last 20 minutes. We have workshops. They're weekly. We have them live and virtual, so you could attend through Zoom and you could attend live, either or. And they are all the time. If you call the office, 315-793-3622, they'll be happy to get you registered for one. There is no cost. Or you can go to eplawcenter.com, E like Echo, P like Papa, eplawcenter.com, and you can register for the workshops there. Or you can call the office and they'll send you a link and you can watch a recorded version if you don't want to go to a live one. But that's the number one thing. Get educated, understand how all this stuff works and how it applies to you. Then from there you figure out how to proceed.